So, friends, we are now being live streamed, I believe, on multiple social media platforms. I believe we are now live on YouTube and on the Facebook all at the same time. Welcome.
Yes, welcome to the 10th episode of the Unifying Force. I'm Catherine, joined by Gio and Dave. How's everybody this morning?
I am doing well this morning/afternoon.
Uh,
Yeah, depending on time zone. I'm good as well. I have a little bit of a hoarse voice, but I'm excited to be here to see you guys and to do this.
all right. Today, figure we talk about Boba Fett's journey in light of hearing about the fact that, the book of Boba Fett's coming up and there's going to be like a sneak peek on it on November 12th, apparently. Uh, Boba Fett is an interesting character. When everybody first met him, he's just like the bounty hunter. And even though he's indifferent, morally indifferent, we still hated him anyway because he's going after heroes, even though he's incredibly badass about it. But chronologically, his story begins as a clone of Jango Fett, who wanted him as payment, apparently, for part of his giving up his genes for being a clone, I think, for the clone army, I suppose. And he's raising and raises him for about 10 years. No growth acceleration, no advanced intelligence or anything like that. And ObiWan eventually discovers this little operation. Jango takes Boba Fett over to Geonosis to meet their employer, Count Dooku. Things go a little crazy, and Jango gets killed by Mace Windu. And this drastically changes the course of Boba Fett's life. He's very traumatized by this, and he goes back to Jango's circle of bounty hunting friends who all have their own agendas who kind of use him. And throughout the Clone Wars, Boba just gets really hardened about it. Goes so far as to try and take revenge against Mace Windu a couple times. Eventually, he gets out of jail and starts becoming a bounty hunter in his own right. Eventually, getting pretty familiar with Darth Vader, kind of chummy with him, doing a lot of jobs for Vader and the Hutt cartels. Eventually, he takes the contract to go find Han and Leia. Succeeds, follows them by slipping out through the garbage in his ship, tracks them all the way to Bespin, turns them in. He kind of complains that, Vader's kind of stringing this thing along. He's like, I don't care if they don't survive. They're worth a lot of money to me. So he really doesn't care about any of the ethics or anything. He just wants to get paid and move on. From there, he takes Han to Jabba's palace, and he hangs out there for nearly a year because he knows that Luke, being Vader's primary target, is eventually going to try and come and save his friends. He's like, ooh, I can double my money. So he hangs out there for a while. Luke does eventually show up. Things don't go exactly as planned. They end up doing this elaborate, execution thing that goes horribly wrong for Boba Fett, who admittedly goes out in a really kind of pathetic way. So fortunately, fast forward 5 years, and he comes back in the Mandalorian. He's been wandering the deserts of Tatooine as like a nomad. You can see that he's got a lot more scars. He's a lot more wizened, and he has a new moral code, seemingly. He's found his ethics, and he's willing to help Din Djarin in his quest to rescue Grogu from Moff Gideon, and that becomes a rather great partnership and pretty good friendship because he goes by he shows him his Mandalorian chain code, and he's like, yeah, we're tight. You could follow me like this, which is kind of interesting because beforehand I never really got the sense that Boba Fett would have kind of like a morals code or whatever. But by the end of the series, Boba Fett has gone back to Tatooine. He's killed Bib Fortuna, who apparently has been like this interior crime lord or whatnot. And Boba Fett has sat on the throne and apparently is going to be taking the leadership ranks, which is very interesting because he's kind of been, again, the mercenary, the follower. So I'm very intrigued as to how this is going to turn out for his journey. And it's so interesting because by that point in the story, he would be, 32, 36. So he'd be 41 years old at the time of the Mandalorian. Of course, he looks weathered beyond his years, and it's like for the first time he's going to be taking on like a different type of, like he's done following people, so to speak. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of journey, especially how they didn't really even provide a reason as to why he was going to do that. He just kind of goes in and, I'm just going to take this throne from you. and interestingly enough, in that scene, we learned that he had not been back to Tatooine or back to Jabba's palace in 5 years. Because Bib Fortuna is shocked to see him alive. Like, oh, I thought you died, and like the Sarlacc kind of thing. So that's a bit interesting that Boba Fett apparently, like, did he choose to be a nomad for those 5 years? Did he have amnesia for a while? We're not really sure. So I thought that would be a really fascinating conversation to have. What do you guys
Well,
think?
I think it's going to be a great conversation, and I would even I intend to like interject some of the Legends material into that because Boba
Hmm.
Fett's life in Legends very different because we see in the Mandalorian that Bo-Katan doesn't consider him a Mandalorian. Doesn't think, oh no, you're not a real Mandalorian, you're a clone, blah blah blah. Well, in the Legends material, he was the Mandalore during the Yusung Vong War. He would like big time major military and planetary cultural leader um, in that, and it affected things hugely. So you know, love to know that that's a completely separate journey. So I think we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we can kind of compare the two of them, maybe side by side, or at the end. But I think that Boba Fett's journey is it's no straight simple line. It's a very zigzag and loopy and circuitous little ongoing adventure that we are now a part of, thanks to John Favreau and Dave Filoni for bringing him back. And I have to say, the single chapter of The Mandalorian that I found uh, the biggest payoff for years and years is actually the one directed by Robert Rodriguez, which has Boba Fett's full return in season 2, because I've been wanting to see how good Boba Fett really is in terms of just a soldier, a warrior, a bounty hunter for years. And I only saw the original trilogy as a somebody who caught them in on the big screen with the re-releases, the special editions in 1997. So I didn't get to see them on the big screen as they were initially released. But I still, from the moment I saw Boba Fett, the iconic armor, the visor, the slightly weathered, war-torn, ragged, rugged look, I was transfixed. He's such an iconically designed character. He's very aesthetically interesting, and just on his appearance alone, there are so many things you can question, and so many little adventures probably represented in the way his armor is worn and what he has on his person in his utility belt. And yeah, I just think that he's a very cult classic character, but he's now come back fully into the mainstream, not just within Star Wars fandom, but within general the pop culture zeitgeist. And that's why it's really fun to focus on him, because even though he's not ostensibly, a spiritual character per se, the way it's easy to see the Jedi are, or anyone relating to the Force who uses and practices the Force, he's obviously somebody who we can focus a lot of the themes that we've discussed over in the past on, and explore how he changes as an individual. And every spiritual journey is all about obstacles in the way, but still finding the way. And I think Boba Fett, even before we get into the slogans of the Mandalorian TV show, and of the Mandalorian people, this is the way to explore the Star Wars galaxy and reflect on our own kind of experiences of the world through a character who goes on a spiritual quest that we're still part of, because we're still seeing where Disney's going to take Boba Fett with the book of Boba Fett. So
Yeah, and I'll argue with you there about it not necessarily being a spiritual journey because it is a spiritual journey for him because as said the quotes of the Mandalorian TV show, weapons are part of my religion. Is the Mandalorians and their code, the fact that he's referencing that chain code and where I've come from, like this is my father's armor and
yeah,
his father, you know, this is his religion. This is his spiritual journey. Um, One a little bit not familiar to what we would be talking about, and when we've been talking about the Force, and from the major religions of this planet that we're used to, but a religious journey nonetheless.
oh, definitely, yeah. I think it's a good comparison, a good juxtaposition. You're looking at a warrior bounty hunter character who's morally gray compared to what we're normally looking at. But the fun thing about our discussions are that we explore the full gray spectrum and see that black and white is a binary mindset that isn't that useful, not only in the Star Wars galaxy, but in our world too. The whole idea of duality can cause a lot of dissonance and confusion amongst people and amongst groups, and can lead to conflict and war. And we see that in Star Wars cyclically happening over and over again. And we see it happening in our world over and over again. And when there is something that is grand and unifying, such as the Force, it can bring people together. And even though Boba Fett, we don't know anything about his specific perspective on things like the Force and destiny, he does seem to be somebody who very certainly believes in his own strength of heart. He has incredible emotional, mental, spiritual resilience, as well as physical constitution and resilience to survive the pit of Carcoon. And even we don't know how many years, how many months he was actually down in the belly of the Sarlacc, but at least in canon now, he is officially alive, on screen, active, engaging with other characters, bringing new people into our experience of Star Wars, and returning, I think, in maybe the most, I am very biased. I wouldn't have said I'm a Boba Fett fan above anything else in The Mandalorian, but I've always loved Boba Fett. I think it's the most glorious episode beyond the finale of The Mandalorian season 2 by a considerable margin, just to see him do his warrior culture thing on screen. And it's very satisfying payoff for a fan. Because Boba Fett was introduced as a very blanket, generic character. He was a white-armored Imperial super commando, a member of a generic group of elite stormtroopers, essentially, with jetpacks and big rifles. He wasn't essentially a character of interest or note when he was initially pitched. And I actually have a Star Wars action figure of the Imperial super commando, essentially a Boba Fett concept artwork. And then obviously they evolved during the development of The Empire Strikes Back to become more interesting, became a singular character. And then he had a name, and his story was expanding with each kind of, I guess, iteration of the Mandalorians and with the bounty hunters that were introduced in The Empire Strikes Back. And I think we're very lucky.
And I think expanding to see Boba Fett expand culturally, because what you're talking about, the episode coming in and the fighting styles that you see of Boba Fett is bringing more into the actor, into Tamora's thing.
Yeah.
So is kind of Maori deal. So Catherine, talk about, like, when did we talked about he's young, he's to about 10, raised by Django, and then do we know when Boba actually started doing mercenary work himself? Like, Wikipedia just says he was very young. Like,
Well, after his father died, he goes back to Florum, where Hondo Anaka is, where what's her name? I'm blanking on her name. The other bounty hunter, the one that
Or Singh.
Aura Singh, that's right. So he goes to meet her, and she's the one who starts planting these ideas in his head that you're never going to get over this grief of your father's death until you kill Mace Windu. And of course, the reason she wants to do that is because she knows that the Separatists are paying, like, I think Cad Bane said it was like 1,000 credits ahead or 10,000 credits ahead for a Jedi. And as Plo Koon later observes that she's really manipulating him to get what he wants, and he seems very confused about it. And it's after he goes to jail on Coruscant. We see him again in the 4th season when ObiWan's going undercover, pretending to be Reiko Hardeen, and he meets Boba Fett in the cafeteria, in the prison cafeteria, and he's a lot more hardened than he was before, even though, depending on exactly what year in the Clone Wars it says, he'd be like maybe 11, 12, or 13, probably closer to 13. And he breaks out during the big prison break that's staged, and he ends up kind of running his own gang for a while. One which Asajj Ventress falls into briefly, in what ultimately was her last arc in the Clone Wars TV show, where Boba Fett's like kidnapping this girl. I can't remember who she was, but like kidnapping for money kind of thing. Like he's really doing some dark kind of stuff for his age. So from there, we haven't seen him since, but I assume he still runs with his own little racket for quite a while until he just comes of age. Like at one point, there was a storyline that they didn't end up getting to film where he and a few other guys and Cad Bane go on this mission to Tatooine, I think it is, and they're supposed to rescue somebody who's been stranded out in the desert or whatnot. And it's sort of like in a sense, a precursor to the Mandalorian because Boba Fett develops this kind of bond with the kid, and he kind of cares about the kid and kind of relate to the kid's plight. But Cad Bane's like, no, this is like for money. This is a job, and it ends up with them having a showdown similar to the end of For a Few Dollars More, where you got the two of them standing like in the ring, and the others are like, oh, we don't want a part of this. We're just sit there and watch. And that's how Boba Fett got the dent in his helmet because Cad Bane shot him, but they didn't really. Of course, because it was canceled, they never got a chance to film it. Now there's rumors that they might even be bringing Cad Bane back at some point. Because, we've seen him show up in the Bad Batch, and there's rumors he might make the jump to live action, which would be pretty cool. But Boba Fett, so sometime after Revenge of the Sith that he starts probably, or before Revenge of the Sith he's running his own racket, but certainly sometime after that he eventually decides to go solo.
So yeah, and I think the whole Cad Bane thing and the arc of Boba caring about a kid and wanting to change his morals, interesting in that if you believe rumors to be true, the Mandalorian was originally still supposed to be the Boba Fett show. It was supposed to be Boba there instead of Din. So were they thinking about that arc, and was that the writing that was happening when that was created? Were they writing that exact story for Boba?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. Like once Clone Wars got canceled, they had all this stuff, and it's like, well, people want like a Boba Fett or Mandalorian thing. So first, it was going to be a movie directed by James Mangold, and then, or at least he said that he had conversations about it. I don't think he was ever officially signed a contract or anything. But once they decided to go, let's not do a movie, let's do a TV show because the Disney Plus thing was going to be taking off. I guess they just decided to be easier to just start with a brand new character, so they don't have to worry about the canon of the guy's past or whatever. You get to play around with it more, and you can bring them in that way. And you don't have to mess with fan expectations and all that kind of stuff. But I would not be the least bit surprised if that's where the whole Lone Wolf and Cub thing initially came from for this show. Not so much from the Lone Wolf and Cub manga, but from the storyline that they had that they get to use for Clone Wars. But I do like the idea that even there, if they'd gotten to film that series, it would have been interesting because through the Clone Wars, you're seeing Boba's arc where he's getting more hardened, like I mentioned. But then in that arc that they didn't get to film, he's like compassionate, which would have been interesting to see because that seems to start a trend. Because if he's compassionate there and this with this kid, then eventually he gets to where he is in the original trilogy, where he's just an impassionate. He's not in it for any type of morals. He's just here. I'm here for the money. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he ran into Han Solo sometime after Return of the Jedi. You wouldn't really have a beef with him. It's like, dude, you owed a debt. I'm a bounty hunter. I collected. I'm not against you or anything. And as you see in The Mandalorian, he's a lot more ethical. Yeah. So somehow I think it's an interesting story that they could still tell at some point at Lucasfilm, how Boba Fett goes from being this more hardened, almost like a, persnickety type kid by the end of the Clone Wars to starting to kind of mature and come off that a bit.
Well, and that brings me to some of the Legends things that you just mentioned happen in Legends, is that Boba and Han actually go on a number of missions together to the point where I think Boba ends up training Han's daughter Jaina Solo to be able to eventually defeat her brother Jason, who has gone over to the Sith. So it was his thing. It's like, it's a job. I can't imagine, and I haven't read that specific novel. I can't imagine that Han really let it go as easily.
Yeah. Yeah, because even in Empire and Jedi, you get the sense that there is even a past history between them going further back even, like he seems to kind of know him. And like I know also in the new Star Wars comics by Marvel, the canon comics, after the events of the original Star Wars, Darth Vader wants to find out who this kid is that destroyed the Death Star. Why is he so powerful? And he hires Boba Fett and Blacker Sanson to go find the details, and Boba goes to Tatooine. He successfully finds out that they're in this cantina with this old guy, and Boba Fett, is trying to interrogate the bartender that you see in the original movie, and the guy's not being cooperative, so Boba Fett just grabs him and lunges him over the bar, body slams him on a table, and he finally tells him what he wants to know. Okay, they were in here a little while ago, he was with this old guy, and he's with Han Solo, and it took off, and then he's like, oh, thank you, and then he shoots him dead because for the inconvenience of having to haul the guy over, throw the guy over the bar. And I was like, man, this is like really, because in Empire, yes, we like to hate on Boba because he betrays our friends, but he doesn't really get to do much. Like he kind of, he stands around kind of looking awesome and fires like a couple pot shots at Luke. But it's kind of neat that, even that early Vader is already, I'm going to depend on you for this very important mission, which ultimately leads Boba Fett going back to tell Vader that, okay, I know the kid's name. His name's, Luke Skywalker. And it's actually in the comics they reveal that Vader, in that moment in the comics when Vader finds out for the first time that this kid he's looking for is his son.
Skywalker.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
Right, and that leads you to the thing where Vader is telling him, because he knows his reputation, Vader's had dealings with him before, because he immediately says, no disintegrations.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our very first question from YouTube right here.
No way.
I know. And the question is, so for everybody, let's do this.
Yeah.
Do you think Boba would have killed Mace in later years if he hadn't been killed by Palpatine? Let's start with Gio.
He would have definitely attempted to finish that mission. Yeah. I don't know if he would have been successful. Was the question implying would he have managed to actually kill Mace Windu, or would he have attempted to? He definitely would have gone for another few assassination attempts, but I think he would have been sticking to his personal and Mandalorian and bounty hunter code, and so not make it, like Jango Fett, I think, hired Zam Wesell to assassinate Padme Amidala in Attack of the Clones at the beginning. And Count Dooku was in charge overseeing that entire operation to orchestrate the Clone Wars beginning. I don't think Boba Fett would have hired someone else. He would have definitely wanted to be the person who executes Mace Windu himself. And it wouldn't have been, a sniper fire from afar, or, a bomb on a gunship, or a Jedi starfighter that's detonated because he's tampered with the engine. It would have been Boba confronts Mace Windu, has a duel maybe with a dark saber in his hand. I think his upbringing and what he experiences would mean he would definitely confront Mace Windu. He'd want to kill him to avenge his father. He was absolutely traumatized in the arena on Geonosis, watching Jango Fett essentially be, I wasn't going to say owned, but he kind of was. But Jango Fett was battered around by the Reek, the beast in the arena first, and probably experienced a bit of head trauma as he was being trampled by a gigantic, multiple-ton weighing beast. So Mace Windu's job in decapitating him by simply running up to him, spinning around, and finishing him off was a lot easier than it would have been had Jango Fett been one-on-one in a fair fight with Mace Windu. And that's even with Mace Windu having his lightsaber, because Mandalorians always have been raised to use weapons that can kind of avoid the clash of a lightsaber and keep you at a distance safely. With a flamethrower, with obviously the lasers, the jetpack, the rope, the cord, and various blades in their wrists. He definitely would have gone for Mace Windu again. Yes.
Yeah.
I feel that if it was the original trilogy era, yeah, he'd be out to kill him, like laser focused. If it was the Mandalorian era, I think he would understand the circumstances more about what was going on. It's like, yeah, you were about to execute their friends. They were obligated to come save them, and that's kind of, and really, the only reason Jango goes after Mace Windu is because of his ego, because he can't stand the fact that Mace Windu got this, snuck up on him like that, and so I think Boba Fett, even as later as he would understand that, but I still think he would feel obligated to try and kill him to avenge his father, albeit I don't think he would be rageful about it. Whereas if it was the original trilogy era where he's more mercenary type of guy doesn't really give a damn about anything, then he would probably be much more rage driven. But I think he would maybe at the very least attempt, or if not, if there's something maybe in the Mandalorian culture where you could have like maybe it doesn't have to be a lethal fight. Like he feels the need to challenge him and best him in some way if you were ever to cross paths with him again.
Yeah, I
So
think that
having the
really,
benefit of both of your answers is I'll give you mine. I think that could have been, another Obi-Wan slash Darth Maul arc is you see these skirmishes between them over and over again, whether
yeah,
one gets injured, the other gets injured. You see that kind of thing happening again throughout time. Is maybe they don't. Maybe one time there is some sort of like sniper assassination he misses, or one is gravely injured and then comes back to see them again. You might end up seeing the duel you get with something like you see from Moff Gideon and Din Djarin is Beskar spear versus saber is
Yeah,
yeah, that's
very
what I
cool
wanted.
kind of things.
Yeah,
yeah, because that's another point. Because as we know from the legends, the Mandalorians during that lengthy war with the Jedi had held their own very well, even though
yep,
they ultimately lost the war.
Hmm.
Uh, and I know that like Gideon was really impressed to see that Din Djarin had this Beskar spear. It's like, oh, you have that. Uh, which is I'd be interested to see. It's a good question. What happened to the rest of it? Because even in the first season of Mandalorian, people see the Beskar and they're like really impressed by it. Like when Din Djarin goes to the armor and he has all this Beskar, and immediately the other Mandalorians are kind of breathing down his neck about it. And it's like we know that the Empire had some of it and remelted it and stamped it with their Imperial logos, but
Right.
I'd imagine there would still be some of the weapons and stuff out there. But yeah, I think Boba Fett in his later years would still feel that obligation, even though it's kind of interesting now I think about it, because as we saw in Clone Wars, when Mace Windu finally had the opportunity to come face to face with Boba Fett outside the Republic prison, Boba says Boba didn't even seem that mad. It's like he was trying to come up with an excuse, explain himself because he's been caught. And Mace Windu says, well, it's not my problem. You're the one who's going to have to live with it. Whereas with Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, I feel Obi-Wan would be more inclined to want to kill Darth Maul simply because he was a Sith Lord. And the Jedi, the Sith are very much the enemy of the Jedi. Whereas I don't think Mace Windu would actively try and engage him, and I'd imagine that would probably anger Boba Fett. Like if Boba Fett were still an adolescent when he encountered Mace Windu again, and he probably wanted to fight him. It's like, fight me, type of thing. And if Mace Windu were to just stand there, he's like, no, because I have no quarrel with you. That's not the Jedi. I'm not the Jedi way. I don't care. That would probably take him aback. But you're right, though. I think that would be very fascinating to see that, even if it were done as like a comic book, like a what if comic book series.
Well,
Be
see,
great.
and I see the roles even slightly reversed than the way you're talking about it is. I mean, I see Boba as Maul, and Mace
Right.
obviously as Obi-Wan, where you see in the end the spoiler alert final duel between Obi-Wan and Maul. Obi-Wan dispatches him handily, but is sad to do it. I mean, it's not
yep,
I've got to kill him because he's this Dark Lord of the Sith or whatever, this creature or whatever that he's become. It's kind of it's. I mean, he's less emotional about it than the Anakin duel, but it's still that just kind of resigned to this is what I have to do, and he'd have let him live if he could. If he
That's
just,
true, because he doesn't really
yep,
feel any malice for him when he dies.
yeah,
yeah. It does. It very much had the end of a great Western film feel. That chapter, Twin Sons in Rebels, where the confrontation that's been building and brewing for years, and for an entire 2, 3 seasons of Rebels, and all of the Clone Wars, reaches its final conclusion. Um, and yeah, I do think that if in a what if alternative reality situation, if Boba had continued to have these run-ins with Mace Windu throughout the timeline from the Attack of the Clones onwards, as we're saying, in a Maul and Obi-Wan type thing, it would have been fascinating, and we would have seen a lot more evolution from his character, because he's very similar to Darth Maul in that he's a cool new bad guy with the action figure that every kid wants that sells out immediately before the film's even released. So,
Exactly.
because I remember that with the Phantom Menace, Darth Maul, I never got him until I was, I don't know, 20, 21. And I was a kid with the Phantom Menace. I wanted him. I would have queued up for him if I could have. And again, oh wow. I actually have a Mace Windu that's from episode 1 as a sneak peek. So it's Star Wars Power of the Force figures. And he has a blue lightsaber because it's before the Phantom Menace. And
Actually, you're
it's
right.
only
This one's the blue as well. You couldn't see it on
That's a collectible now, Dave. You got to put that in the ceramic.
It's one of my few
You
that's
have to
actually in
start
the little
looking for a
box.
thing for that.
Yeah, I've got mine in the little box still. So it actually says episode 1, sneak peek, because it was before the promotional material with Darth Maul. But Darth Maul was used as the figurehead to advertise the new trilogy of Star Wars films, and on all the merchandise and all the action figures. And he was front and center of the logo. Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace. You see Darth Maul, and he says a few lines in one of the trailers about fear. Fear attracts the strong, the weak, the innocent, and then fear is my ally. But then he doesn't say much in the actual film, and he doesn't use those lines, unfortunately. Boba Fett's similar. He has maybe 6 lines, 5 lines in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He's no good to me dead.
So here's a question from the
Yeah.
Facebook now, and
Yep.
getting him from both. And it was kind of leading towards what I was going to ask next. The question is, what sort of damage do you think that Boba is going to do with the Throne of the Hutts? Because, assuming that Bib Fortuna was controlling the Hutt cartel, and all of Jabba's minions as he was doing it, I would assume that puts Boba in charge now. What do you think we're going to see in the book of Boba Fett? I mean, what's going to happen? What's he going to do?
Well, I heard that, because the Mandalorian is broken down into chapters 1 through 16, that the book of Boba Fett will be beginning as chapter 17 through 24, even though it's not titled The Mandalorian, but it's sort of related, because I think that might give more credence to the rumors that Mandalorian's going to end after season 3. Not that the whole show and the characters are going to end, but since the characters will probably be splitting off and dovetailing. So I wonder, because going back to, we know in the Legends continuity, the definition of Mandalorian was different. And, Jango Fett was born on Conquered Dawn and kind of abducted and all that. And whereas in Clone Wars, was it the prime minister or whatever, or not the prime minister, but the secretary or whatever to Duchess Satine was like, oh, Jango's not a Mandalorian. I don't know how he acquired that armor, blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't seem to be familiar with the actual Mandalorian code, which they doubled down on in the Mandalorian TV show. Granted, Bo-Katan isn't too familiar with it either, because she tried to say that he's not Mandalorian, but in fact that he is, which is kind of odd, because because I think at some point Bo-Katan in the series even acknowledges that, Mandalorian's not a race, it's like a creed. And so now that he's going to be on the throne, it's like, could this be becoming an extension of the Mandalorian Empire? Because, Mandalore has just been its own planet since the fall of the Clone Wars, or even actually more so since the end of the Jedi Mandalorian War thousands of years earlier. They've just been their own little, one-off planet. But since Boba Fett is like a Mandalorian, and assuming that there might be a kernel of truth to the false rumors that the Empire would spread about Mandalore being a wasteland and don't go back there as all the Mandalorians are killed, that in a way, if Boba Fett is leading this cartel, leading this powerful thing, it's like the new Mandalorian Empire, which could come into conflict with whatever Din Djarin and Bo-Katan are going to be doing, presumably going back to Mandalore at some point. Because he's like, I've got my own path to follow type of thing. It's like, yeah, we were partners for a while, but we're done now. Our mission's over. The kid's fine. You don't want to be the leader. You've got this conflict with her. It's like, hey, that's not my thing. And he could be becoming a problem, perhaps trying to resurrect the old ways, because after so many years of playing like second fiddle to so many other people, and now that he's kind of has his own code, he might be like, you know what, I'm going to institute this and turn this into what I want it to be. Because I'm not even sure if the Hutt cartel at this point exists in the same way. Because in Clone Wars, they established that Jabba got leverage over the other 5 families with the the little black book of all their dirty secrets, so that which put Jabba on top. And after Jabba died, and in some of the Legends material, they say that kind of led to more or less the collapse of the cartel kind of splitting into different factions. So I'm not sure what the status of that is, or if Bib Fortuna was even the leader, or maybe he was just camping out at the palace, because he was the only. And Bib Fortuna was like the only one inside the room. He didn't have a bunch of people hangers on. He didn't have any guards. Like, he could have just been saying, "Hey, the luxury palace is mine." But I do think that maybe Boba Fett will be trying to resurrect the Mandalorian Empire with all of this whatever power that that throne still has.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So what I'm hoping we see is some flashback stuff. I'm hoping we get some backstory on the time in the Sarlacc. Is what happened? What have we been doing in the 5 years? Like you asked, why hasn't he been back to Jabba's palace before now? Did he need his armor to do it? I don't know that he needed his armor based on seeing his hand to hand and what he was doing in the Mandalorian episode. I think he could have taken Bib Fortuna, with a gaffy stick. So,
yeah.
But I'm hoping we get some backstory and some things happening there. I think, maybe this will be what you're talking about earlier, is we've seen that Fennec is with him, and Fennec has this history with Cad Bane as well as he does. We're seeing that in the Bad Batch. This is a darn fine excuse to bring Cad into, and even could we bring in other bounty hunters and see, an episodic bounty hunter type show? Do we bring, Bosk back and whoever is,
please.
There is that's what the Mandalorian has done. It's gone episodic. He's gone and seen other people. He brings other people into the live action and into the TV show verse.
That'd be a great way for him to raise money. Start it as like a bounty hunter collective, where like here's kind of like Grief Karga has with the Bounty Guild, except they'll do their own. They'll have their own way, and won't have to follow the same code.
Yeah, a little Just Giving page for the revival of the Mandalorian culture.
Yeah.
Please donate now. Share generously.
Another thing that just occurred to me is that in the Mandalorian, he still has Slave One. Yes, everybody, still Slave One, and so I don't know where he kept it parked when he was on Tatooine and Return of the Jedi. I would assume.
Where did he park?
Right.
Well, no, not in the sense of where is it parked, but it's like if he hasn't been back to the palace in years, because Bib Fortuna was clearly shocked to see him, and I would have assumed that his ship was nearby, and the idea that it wasn't taken apart by scavengers makes me wonder, maybe like Jawas even would be fearful of his reputation. Oh, we know the guy who owns the ship. We don't want to get on his bad side. Because that's like you said, like the weapons are their religion. Well, in a way, maybe the armor is too. Because Boba Fett's armor originally was not supposed to be Beskar. And then I think I can't remember, did they get into trying to retcon that and say that it is?
So in Legends, they refer to Mandalorian iron.
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily use the word Beskar. No. So that leaves for the fuzzy. There's a lot of fuzzy right there.
Right, because
I assume in my mind that Beskar is Mandalorian iron. We see, or he tells us in the Mandalorian when he gets the armor back, that this was his father's, and he's just put a paint job on it. It was that shiny Beskar looking steel when Jango wore it.
Okay, so it is the same one. Okay, that's what I couldn't remember if it was like the same outfit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can see why he would therefore want the armor back. Not so much that he necessarily needs it to kill Bib Fortuna, but it's like this is part of how he presents himself. Kind of like Kylo Ren wants to deck himself out to look like Vader, to be intimidating. That's important to him. Like Boba Fett, this is part of his religion as well. Because he certainly because even when he sees Din Djarin when you first see him for the first time in season 2, he doesn't seem angry or upset. He sees Din Djarin escaping with the armor, and he's kind of subdued. He's like, okay, he wants it back, but it's almost like it's this. He's not just going to run in all willy nilly and do it. Like he wants to really. He's smarter than that, which I kind of like. But it could be that he feels that's part of his religion as well, which gives me which makes me think that he's somehow going to be bringing this religion into whatever it is that he's going to be doing on Tatooine.
Yeah. I think he's. I think very clearly we are kind of insinuating, if we haven't explicitly described, that we feel the time elapsing between the fall of the Empire, the end of Return of the Jedi, and the events of the Mandalorian Disney Plus show are going to be a fascinating insight into Boba Fett's spiritual journey, because he goes through such transformation in character. Even though he's not very well defined or fleshed out on screen in the original trilogy, he is clearly content with pursuing bounties, going after merchandise, and finishing the missions that he's given by even the most dictatorial and demonic people in the galaxy, like the Empire and Darth Vader. So if he has a very robotic ability just to start, acquire, complete, and obtain the gold at the end of these missions, that's how he's been plying his trade for 20 years, since being a teenager and orphaned again, up until Return of the Jedi. Once he falls into the pit, whether he's in there for a couple of days, a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of months, a couple of years, he's definitely had time either in there or elsewhere to meditate, to think, to reflect on who he is, what his identity means to him. Who is Boba Fett? He had an opportunity probably to, once he crawled out of the Sarlacc, to start a new identity, have a new life, but he stuck with the name. He stuck with the creed, it seems. He stuck with the dedication to the cause of being a bounty hunter, but first and foremost being a Mandalorian. And we see that in the fact that he still wants the armor back, but he's not willing to just kill people and take it, even though it does belong to him by right. And so he, from the little character we knew of him before, which was just a blanket robotic automaton doing bounties and serving the Empire because they probably paid the best, to becoming not someone who's aligned with the dark side, even though he's never been. He's in the morally gray area as a bounty hunter on the fringe of this conflict in the galaxy. He's now somebody who maybe has abstained from it and just observed for 5 years the warring remnants of the Empire fight the rebels, the rebellion, and the growing and returning Republic as the new Republic. And he's been on the sidelines just deciding, well, who am I? I'm Boba Fett. What do I need? I need my father's Beskar armor back. How am I going to get it? Who knows? Maybe that's what the flashbacks in the Boba Fett, the book of Boba Fett will show us. But he's definitely a new character with a new philosophy in terms of his mindset, from what we've seen in the Mandalorian season 2.
And you bring up a good point, and maybe this is why over those years, however many years it's been since he got out of the Sarlacc and without his armor, is why didn't he just go take it from Cobb Vanth? Because I mean, he could have easily.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and Cobb Vanth looked skilled, but I don't think he could have handled that Maori kind of Filipino martial arts single stick combat. That was absolutely incredible to watch. I still love that chapter.
So let's throw this question out, as I'm not even acknowledging Spencer's other comment about Slave One on the no, that didn't exist. So, but is this journey an inevitable journey for a Mandalorian? Because we kind of see a similar journey take place with Din Djarin. Some of the first words that we hear him utter are, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold. And we end with him removing his helmet in violation of his code before other people to snuggle with Grogu. Is this kind of journey inevitable as a Mandalorian? Do we see evidence? Ooh, very nice. Do we see evidence of that in other Mandalorian stories? Satine, Bo-Katan, is others in Legends. Go.
Well, in his Din Djarin's case, he was like raised in an radical offshoot cult kind of thing, and it seems that the purpose of having the Grogu character was to facilitate the change of him getting unbrainwashed, if you will. Because when he had his first, Because when he had his first encounter with Bo-Katan, even though she saves his life, he's not very thankful or grateful. He can't stand that she's not wearing the helmets, and they're like, oh, he's one of those people. Whereas now that he's finally fallen out of it, that's going to cause issues with the armor down the line. But as for whether that relates to other Mandalorians like Satine, it's like I didn't feel that Satine had in any way, shape, or form embodied the whole Mandalorian code. She was like total pacifist. She didn't want to even acknowledge that iconography because that's what the Death Watch had adopted on the moon out there, because they didn't, she wanted to do this completely different thing where I'm going to pretend this whole culture and everything we've been is irrelevant and there's nothing there. And so in a sense, you could say there's an inevitability that was never going to work, that, trying to deny who you are and who the people feel they are is not going to, it's going to collapse in on itself at some point. But, we've seen a bit of Bo-Katan's journey as well. We get why she's the way that she is, a bit more, she sticks to her own code as well. Like we saw in the Rebels TV show, what was going on with her family and how they wanted to maintain their power by being subservient to the Empire, and that really didn't jive with, sister, and that kind of, whereas Bo-Katan's kind of was a bit more understanding of it because like, hey, we can't let ourselves get wiped out. Whereas now you see Bo-Katan in the Mandalorian, and now that the Empire has kind of fallen, she's like, I think she wants to go all out. I think she would be more interested in adapting the old school Mandalorian ways from Legends. She's like, we've been subservient to these Empire people for too long. Let's finish the job. Let's wipe them out, and you can understand from her backstory where that comes from. So there's a lot of change, the semblance of change with certain characters. But as far as the unbrainwashing thing with Din Djarin specifically, I'm not really sure, at least for other Mandalorian characters.
I mean, I suppose it's somewhat as I feel it has to do with how a Mandalorian or how that particular character deals with death. We've seen the hints that Din fell into the cult, the Death Watch like people, because that's who adopted him after his parents were presumably killed. We've seen how Boba dealt with the death of Jango, was to continue and go down that dark path to it, and Boba accepted. Did Death Watch become Death Watch because of Maul? Was Death Watch going there anyway? And Bo-Katan obviously dealing with the death of Satine, and going the opposite way, because who killed Satine? It was the people that were the cultists.
Yeah, I think that Satine represents an aspect of Mandalorian culture which we see very little of, but definitely exists. And Sabine Wren in Rebels is also of that nature, because she has the warring aspect of her mother's side and lineage, but her father was an independent artist and creative character, and that's why she has the fascination and the skill to be an artist herself, and that becomes a more important thing as Rebels goes on, and it is all linked to her upbringing, her background, her ancestry, and maintaining a kind of element of classics and classical creativity and art and expression. And what I thought incredible about Rebels is that they touch on this kind of cultural melting pot that is the galaxy of Star Wars, because Thrawn is fascinated with Mandalorian culture and has studied it. And he's a collector himself of artwork and artifacts. And we know that he actually really enjoys music as well. And the Kevin Kiner score for Rebels has a kind of Mandalorian specific theme, has a Sabine theme, has a Thrawn theme. And when they are together in that room discussing Mandalorian heritage, the music blends together really well. I remember thinking, I've only seen that episode once, and that actual season of Rebels just a single time, but I remember thinking, whoever's designed and edited this episode knows exactly thematically what they are trying to convey, because they are genuinely blending through the sound mixing and editing the two cultures that might seem very different. So the Chiss, who are an extra galactic, strategic species of alien who have come to the galaxy, and Thrawn is the very best mind from their armada, and he's now in the Empire, strategizing with the Emperor about how to destroy the rebels and recapture Lothal. And he's also wanting to recapture elements of the other galaxy, and he wants to acquire Mandalorian artifacts too. I just thought that was a really fascinating thing. I know it doesn't relate specifically to Boba Fett, but it does relate to the overall conversation about where does Boba Fett's spiritual journey lie in comparison to other Mandalorians, because Sabine was on a different parallel journey to what we see with Boba Fett, and what is emulated, as we've discussed already, in The Mandalorian with Din Djarin. They are both kind of orphans who are almost by default brought under the Mandalorian fold, and their specific backgrounds are a little different. Boba Fett had his father who, depending on how much canon and legends you use, maybe not, was an authentic Mandalorian, but he was brought up by a single person who brought him into the Mandalorian culture and religion. And then you have Din, who was found during the Clone Wars after being orphaned in that war by Death Watch. And at that time, we don't know what level of extreme Death Watch were, other than they saved that village in the flashback in The Mandalorian season 1. They rescued people who were not of their immediate tribal background, and they brought up an orphan kid who was our main character. So we know that Death Watch are not simply a clear-cut, crazy terrorist group, the way that they are. They experienced that kind of propaganda against them.
Well, that wasn't Death Watch that saved them. They were called the Watch. I think
okay.
It's a different offshoot.
So again, that's another group that adds to our point, though, that there are so many different, in the same way that in our world, if there's a belief system or a political system or any kind of grouping of humans, there are going to be multiple interpretations of it along a spectrum. And you will have some people on one end who believe people closer to the other end are extreme. But the irony is, if they're on one end of a spectrum, they are extreme too. And you'll get people all along the scale in the middle. And that's the kind of gray area. What I was saying is the binary duality of thinking is the one where you get clashes, because then you get people on the left side of the scale, or let's say the east and the west side, and then you clash in the middle, and you have wars over Mandalore.
The sharks and the jets.
Yes, there you go. Because saying left and right sounds too political. Saying east and west sounds too real world geographical. So sharks and jets is perfect.
So we're getting close to the end of the time here. Let's wrap this up with, here's a question I have for you. Forget what Lucas says. Forget what Lord Filoni says. Forget what Favreau says. Is Boba Fett a real Mandalorian? Yes or no, and why? Catherine?
I would lean more towards no, because we don't really know why Jango wanted a son for himself as part of his payment, because there's such a gray area in terms of what his life was with his father. We know that Boba had met Jango's associates like Hondo Ohnaka, Aurra Singh, because when they all met.
Oh.
Hello?
I think we got through the whole thing and Catherine's frozen at the end.
Oh, no.
Well, hopefully she will be back. Gio, we'll go to you while she's frozen.
Okay, sure. Is Boba Fett, in my opinion, a real Mandalorian? I'll have to define a real Mandalorian. My interpretation of what we've seen on screen is that... Catherine, do you want to finish your sentence?
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere, but I'm back, I guess.
Yeah, it just froze a mid-sentence.
So I would say no, because you didn't get the sense that Boba even was aware of a code even during Clone Wars. It's like he's very emotional, going off the rails kind of thing, because he's upset with his father being dead. He wants revenge, and because there's such a gray area. And the way that Hondo and Aurra Singh talk about Jango, he's honorable and all that. But it's like, well, what does honor mean to you people? Because, you lie, you cheat, you steal, you kill. And yeah, obviously we know that at the time Lucas was in charge, he was saying there's no congruent continuity with like who's saying what. Like obviously when Lucas was in charge, oh, he's not a Mandalorian. They're just like this offshoot. Now Filoni's in charge. He's like, no, people wanted to be a Mandalorian. But thinking about it, as far as what a Mandalorian actually is, I would think he became one and started adapting their ways much later in life. But I didn't get the sense that from Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones that he was being reared in that way. But it's hard to say because it's like, again, there's so much gray area there. So I'm kind of 50-50 on it. But at present, based on the information we have now, I would say no. I would say he just adopted their ways later in life. Because even this whole thing about Mandalorians being a creed is still something that's very new. Because like Gio was saying, there's so many different offshoots and we're learning so many things about it. And the different offshoots are very judgmental of each other and how they define what a Mandalorian is and how others say, no, you define it this way. So it's kind of, there is no singular definition of what that is. So for the most part, I would say, I guess by that confusion, you could say he's a Mandalorian. Yeah, why not? Because he does have the best scar, and he is following a morals code of his own. But it's too hard to say for me definitively, depending on how you want to define. Because it all comes down to definitions.
That's exactly what I was saying when you were cut off and the question went back to me. The first thing is, did you finish? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Shall I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was saying the question, if is Boba Fett a real Mandalorian, in my opinion, the first way I would begin responding is, well, what is the definition of a real Mandalorian? So from everything that I've seen, just subjectively to me, and this will be influenced by, is this an answer just going by the current Star Wars canon, or can I allow Legends EU
You can do
influence?
anything you want to. It's
Okay,
your
cool.
head canon. It's what
So
you
for
feel.
me, EU and Legends is as important as canon because it all contributes to the overall expansion of the universe of Star Wars and world building, and it enhances the characters and the cultures specifically relating to this question. So I think a real Mandalorian is somebody who authentically believes they are a Mandalorian, whatever that means, and lives by a set of core principles that are in alignment with what is generally a commonality amongst all people who hail from Mandalore, whether they are specifically, officially, ethnically Mandalorian, whether they are a foundling, an adoption person, somebody who's been brought into the fold or chosen to take up the mantle and identity of Mandalorian. It doesn't matter. Are they authentically committing their life to the identity of a Mandalorian? That is a real Mandalorian to me. And so Boba Fett very affirmatively does that on screen. And maybe it's taken him decades to come to that realization, but he has done. And that's why the book of Boba Fett could be fascinating, because if we do get flashbacks, which I hope we do, then we could learn how he came to that conclusion, because that's a very important part of his spiritual journey. And I think that he wanted to acquire the armor because it was the final piece to complete the restoration of his identity and to confirm his legacy from his father as a son, and from his culture. And I think both things are equally important to Boba Fett as we see him in The Believer, chapter 16 of The Mandalorian. So I would say absolutely he is a real Mandalorian because he has the belief as an individual, I am a Mandalorian. He seems to believe in the wider code and culture and religion, and he acts with the firm intent on regaining that which he has lost or been taken or stolen from him, which would physically give him the identity to everybody around him of a Mandalorian. So physically, mentally, spiritually, yes, he is tick, tick, tick. I am a Mandalorian, and therefore he is a real Mandalorian.
There you go. And I'm going to say I agree with you both for very much reasons. Is before, from the events of the original trilogy and what we've seen in Rebels and what we have seen in Clone Wars, I would have said no. But from the
Yeah.
more we learn about the Mandalorian code and how it's a creed and how there are foundlings, regardless of whether Jango was a real Mandalorian or not, because we know very little about Jango, at least what we see on screen. But based on what we've seen in The Mandalorian, I'm going to go with yes, because he is
Yeah.
following the creed. He is moving forward and supporting those ideals. We'll see what he does in the book of Boba Fett. Let's see, how he goes towards those further, how he goes away from them. I mean, he could go steal the dark saber from Din Djarin, and he's the Mandalorian. We move on.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you
I
can't
almost
argue.
hope he does, or that is a storyline aspect. Yeah.
So, but that is our time for today. I have enjoyed the conversation. Catherine, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, check out our TeePublic store virtual cantina. We got shirts, we got tote bags, and other sweaters and things. Every Tuesday at 4 Pacific, we have the virtual cantina happy hour, which is basically us hanging out, having fun. And then at 6 p.m. Pacific, there's the after hours, which is a fun game time, which is great. Every Thursday nights, about 7 Pacific, 7 p.m. Pacific, should say, we do watch-alongs, be it of Star Wars movies, of the TV shows. We just finished all 4 Indiana Jones films, and this week we're going to be doing Corvette Summer, which is like a 70s high school car type movie with Mark Hamill, the first movie he did after Star Wars. So that'll be fun. And starting on Tuesday during the happy hour, we're actually going to start doing watch-alongs of Visions show, and don't worry, we're going to be mining Visions a lot on this show in the future as we catch on. As I understand it, they dropped several episodes all at once. So
all of them, I think.
Oh, all of them. Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's
nine.
all we're getting for now, at least. That's
Yeah, it was just
they
one.
dropped, like an entire season or whatnot.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Even better. So yeah, I'll be able to watch it, rewatch it. So yeah, so check that out. We'll be back on Sunday, October 10th. Don't have a topic yet to reveal, but we will reveal it in due time. And make sure to join us next Sunday for Jedi Archives, which is a fun show.
All right, all. This is the way. May the Force be with you.
This is the way. May the force be with us all. See you next time.